by the military-industrial complex.
It could be seen to move violently forward, violently forward, violently forward.
I'm just a patsy.
Let's win there.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
You think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAC.
Well, you have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so That's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
And he was there, and now he's and my voice was there, and now my voice isn't there. And we're back. And let's see if we can find George Webb. Let's see. There he is.
Hey, Peter, how are you?
I'm doing great, except I started to talk and realized that there was something in my throat. So here I am. How you doing?
Well, great. Well, first thing I got to do is this is going to be a year in review show, and plus we're going to do predictions. So the first thing in the year in review is I wanted to do a shout out to Karma Doc. She's America's frontline doctor who actually was a frontline doctor, the only one. And she just did this. She sponsored the last charrette, bought us all hotel rooms and all of us, all these gifts and everything. And one of the gifts, you had mentioned this before, was
the conspiracy theory card game.
Yeah, and I think
there was an Illuminati card. Yeah,
she bought us all this, and then the Illuminati. She also bought us this
game, the Game of Conspiracy, second edition. All right.
Yeah. So and they're different they're two different games, and so, but I'll give you one of the questions. It said, no, I won't do that one. We'll give you one question. China is harvesting the organs of prisoners who follow what meditation practice? Yoga. I don't know what the other one is. Taoism.
It's Falun Gong.
I knew it was Falun. Yeah, Falun Gong. Okay. Yeah. So that's one of the easier ones. Okay, let's get you a tech question really quick. Okay.
Okay.
I should have a welcome to Conspiracy Theory with Peter Duke. Okay.
I would have worn my tinfoil hat if I had thought you were going to do this.
Okay. Well, I'll just give you a couple to start everybody thinking here. In 2016, the Office of Naval Research allocated $750,000 to develop what kind of hybrid animal technology? 1, exploding kittens. 2, cyborg locusts. 3,
dolphins.
Well, dolphin-powered Zodiac boats is one of them. And then cybernetic German shepherds. And the answer is B, cyborg locusts. So
who knew?
Anyway, that's those two brain teasers to start our show.
I did see somebody sent me I saw something earlier about I think one of our followers sent us a thing on bioweapons deployed by Dragonfly drones. I haven't had a chance to look at it. I just saw the picture. It had a cool picture.
Speaking of drones, I wrote this book a while back with your picture on it, right? Which was
the best picture of me ever taken.
I think people love that picture. Your wife loves it, so that's all that counts. And it's Less Tragedy, More Hope. But no one said anything. No one has said anything since Rhodes died in South Africa about the Suez Canal being the quicker route, making it 62 days faster, because you don't have to go around the Cape of Good Hope. Nobody said anything since his death. And then I wrote about it, right? And now, what do you see?
I think you're being a bit hyperbolic.
Yeah, maybe. But I wrote about it, and then Rothschild's financing and so on. Now every other post on Twitter is about how traffic is going to be delayed. It's going to cause worldwide bank shortages, worldwide, real estate collapse. The currency is being pulled. It's metadata priming for this thing that's going to happen in the Red Sea. And you knew as soon as they blamed Donald Trump for it, that was going to be your go signal. And it happened today. The Iranians, or the Peter Strzok and the CIA gang, blamed Donald Trump for the October 7th Hamas hang glider, the flying monkeys.
Really?
Yep, today. You knew it had to happen because, and people will remember this, when I went to West Palm Beach and Trump was raided, I said it was the Soleimani raid that he had was the key thing. The reason why he wanted to kill Soleimani, who's the Iranian leader of the Quds Force, Iranian Revolutionary National Guard, is they had a plan sitting there to vector people, students from one country into Canada because they have looser restrictions, and then vector them down through the northern border to create a live exercise. And it was originally going to be Iranian students. And Trump got wind of it, and we hacked into the air traffic control of Tehran, and they shot down the Ukrainian Kolomoisky's jet, and then killed Soleimani. I can't remember which was first. I think they killed Soleimani first, and then they went ahead with the plan, and they shot the plane down anyway. And that's why they had to have the slop trough in Wuhan, where the 40,000 students came to Wuhan a couple of days later, and then they vectored the Chinese students. But originally the students were going to come through Iran and then into Canada, and then they had to redo it all.
Right. Well, let me break this down.
Yeah.
because I'm at the back of the fire truck right now.
Okay. Sorry. I just wanted to go through this because they're blaming Trump for October 7th Hamas flying monkey attack, terrorist attacks.
Right.
Because
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I talked to a friend of mine last night who's working on a project that interviewed a bunch of the people who were at that rave. They've been doing interviews with something that is unreported in the news is that most of those people were high when that event happened, and so and they were either on the information that I got is that they were either high on coke or they're high on LSD, and the people who were high on coke got away, and the people who were on LSD couldn't even put two and two together. They couldn't figure out what was going on, and those were the victims there. In any case, sidebar note. So Trump is now being associated. They're trying to attach Trump. Now this seems like a stretch to me, because the conventional wisdom is that Trump is Israel's guy, right? And so trying to put Trump together with Hamas seems to fly in the face of that logic. It causes a certain amount of cognitive dissonance in me.
The Iranian government came out, and this is why I say whoever the puppet is, whoever Strzok's puppet is running Iran at the time, will say anything that Strzok and the CIA want, as long as they get their oil concession, right? And they're saying Trump's the reason. So the Iranian government is saying Trump is the reason that they finance these raids with Hamas, and that Iran is.
See, if Trump was smart, he would get on Twitter right now and he said, "Of course, I'm the reason. If I had been elected, it wouldn't have happened."
Again,
right.
There might be pretty smart politics to do that.
Right.
He might have. Should probably go to Truth Social, but Jim Hoft, Gateway Pundit, has, I think, the article. And a couple of other people now. If you do Trump Iran, this is all going to be a replay of 2016. We had Trump Russia. Now we're going to do Trump Iran. Take everything the CIA has done in terms of covert actions and then blame Trump.
Yeah, well, this is the spoiler alert for everybody. One of our predictions for the end of the show that you're going to get right now is that everything in 2024 is going to be an election story, whether it takes place in Israel or Iran or Pakistan or Afghanistan, wherever it takes place, it's always, every story in the news is going to be about the American election.
And I would add to that 2 words at the end, like the Chinese fortune cookie, blaming Trump.
Blame Trump, right?
Unfortunately,
unfortunately, I think that Barbara Streisand is going to lose her moniker of the Streisand effect, because I think that the Trump effect is like a magnitude greater than the Streisand effect. Every time they try to attack Trump, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi when Darth Vader takes him down. It's like, if you strike me down, I'll come back so much more powerful, you won't even believe it. And Trump is kind of turning into Obi-Wan Kenobi at this point.
I think you're right, and they must have an ace up their sleeve. You know, a Crossfire Hurricane 2 is coming. Brennan's got something. And again, I hate to say it, I hate to sound like Hillary Clinton, but assassination always is an option. You know, I mean, she came out, you know, and Barack Obama had that huge lead, and she said, well, you know, yeah, not the first person who thought of snipers, you know. So, yeah, they seem to be dumping everything in the Trump wagon right now.
So where do you want to start with this year?
Well, I mean, I won't even go through the timeline, but I can almost do one in my head.
I know you can. That's why I love doing the show with you.
Well, this year is a crazy year because it starts out with Jordan Walker and the best journalism ever. Everybody calls in from all over the world simultaneously. It's not rehearsed. And they all call in and they all say this is the best journalism ever. And they don't even know who Jordan Walker is. And all they have to go by is the film.
And it turns out neither does James O'Keefe.
He doesn't want to know. That's the other amazing part of this. In the 12 months, if you remind somebody that they said this was the best journalism ever, they'll block you. They'll say you're harassing them. They'll say you're gang stalking them. You know, but yet you were collecting the checks. You were bringing in the checks, no problem, in January. But you don't want to deliver to the people that you promised that you would go get to the story when you got the checks. So I think it's the most amazing story ever in terms of a forgotten story.
Right. And for people who haven't been following along, what George is talking about is that James O'Keefe broke the Jordan Walker story. And then researchers on George's channels and George figured out that Jordan Walker was the co-author on a paper that recommended remdesivir as the standard of care. And that at the same time that the James O'Keefe thing was going on, the World Economic Forum was happening. And the head of Boston Consulting Group that put together the remdesivir recommendation paper was making a presentation at the World Economic Forum. And James O'Keefe, in a fundraising Twitter space, within a couple of days of that story breaking, got a chance to talk to George, and George downloaded the information about the remdesivir paper and then started asking him questions about the perfect org chart, and within hours, like 48 hours or so of that conversation, Project Veritas imploded after James O'Keefe tweeted out the documents that George was referencing in the Twitter space. So if you haven't been following that, you might go back and check in George's timeline, or check in. George wrote, I think you wrote 4 or 5 different Substacks on that, right, George?
Yeah. So, Pfizer Perfect, our chart, James Keefe. Here's the Trump story. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah, Iran claims credit for October 7th Hamas massacre, saying it was revenge for President Trump's killing of Soleimani by Gateway Pundit. It's interesting. I wonder if Twitter is blocking that story at this point. I'm friends with Jim Hoff. I like Jim Hoff. I like the Hoff brothers, but they play to the dialectic. They play to the left-right formula too much for me, but I am part of a Twitter thread that has a bunch of journalists where we talk to each other about the stories that we're working on. And one of the guys in my Twitter thread is a Gateway Pundit writer, and every time he posts something in that thread for the rest of the journalists to read, it gets flagged as potentially false information, no matter what it is that he's writing about. And it's always because it's coming from the Gateway Pundit. So X has got the Gateway Pundit flagged in that way.
Yeah, I just am going by the metadata, and I'm saying that this is the war cycle up. You know, the standard drumbeat of Iran attacks America, like they did with Saddam Hussein. This is like they triple the output of their high enriched uranium.
Right. And all of this is going on simultaneously. Again, we're jumping right to predictions here, but
okay.
I watched one of our followers sent me a link to a video that dropped about 3 weeks, a video and a book that dropped about 3 weeks ago by a guy named Webb. And I was thinking there's a lot of Webbs, you know, there's Gary Webb, there's George Webb, there's Whitney Webb, and now there's David Webb. And David Webb did this book and a film called The Great Taking, where he does something that I've been waiting for somebody to do, which is that he took all of the components that Catherine Austin Fitts has kind of written about exhaustively for the last 4 or 5 years, and he puts them together in a narrative. So it's really tight. I think it's like 107 minutes long or something like that. And he shows you all of the laws that have been changed in all of the states of the Union since 1994 that will allow the New World Order to collapse the economy at the moment that they deem fit, and exactly what the legal and financial mechanisms are for doing that. And so that all seems to be lining up right now with all of these other events that they want to use in order to distract you. So the election, if you're unregistered to vote like I am, then the election is just kind of a distraction. But if you're invested in the republic, which has been rebranded as a democratic republic, the word democracy is not in the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. Then the real game here is to take control of all of the financial and real property in the world in order to do this great reset for 2030. So I recommend that movie, David Webb's The Great Taking.
Great. Oh, well, it sounds good. 2030, I think it's a series of small earthquakes is better than one, great shock, but like Great Reset 2, Great Reset 3, Great Reset 4. I'll just show you real quick, and sorry we don't have the snazzy graphics that we should have.
Well, if you tell me where to go, I'll try to come up with something.
Hit Iran. They have oil fields out in the open. They have the Revolutionary Guard headquarters.
Well, just send me a link and I'll pull it up.
Let me make it big.
I've been saying for 6 months now.
Here, George, we have the tools. Just send me a link.
Out in the open. They have the Revolutionary Guard headquarters you can see from space. Blow it off the map. I've been saying for 6 months now. Hit Iran. They have oil fields out in the open. They have the Revolutionary Guard headquarters you can see from space. Blow it off the map. I've been saying for 6 months now.
That to me, anytime you see Lindsey Graham say anything, it's always because the phone rang, and it's okay. This is the official signal. So sometime between January the 3rd. Oh, there you go.
It's really changed the way I look at everything.
Mm-hmm.
The Mackinder view. And this is the Mackinder map of the world. We all were taught geography with this National Geographic map, National Geographic being a British organization. where Greenland is the same size as South America. And Owen Benjamin does a really funny stand-up routine about that. But where's Iran? Where's Israel? Where's Saudi Arabia? They're right there in the MRG of the inner or marginal crescent. This is the inflection area for controlling what Mackinder called the pivot area, or the great island. So when I hear Lindsey Graham talking about this, when I see what's going on with Hamas, when I see what's going on with the invasion of all of the immigrants into Western Europe, the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline, I just think I just go right to this map in my head now, because of course
the key choke point, the key bottleneck there is the Suez Canal and the Red Sea.
Yeah, it's right there on ore, right?
Yes. And if you bottle either one of those, and the Good Ship Evergreen was your first test when they turned the Good Ship Evergreen sideways. That's the book I wrote about it, right? The Everclear, whatever it was called.
That was probably a test to see how easily they could block the Suez Canal, right? Yeah.
But we went to Long Beach and did a thing in Long Beach, and we showed how the ports of Long Beach were backed up because of the Suez Canal, because the boats couldn't leave or come to Long Beach because their original point of shipping, or the end point, was through the Suez Canal. And if you go around like this second line at the bottom, it's 62 days more. So they're going to say it's in your vital interest. We didn't get involved in Hamassaker because it wasn't in our vital interest. But now Americans, this is in your vital interest. Not only are they 3 times greater output of highly enriched uranium, but here we go. They're saying that, by the way, we're going to have a nuclear weapon in 32 to 34 days. A new form of nuclear weapon. How do they know that they're going to have a new form of nuclear weapon in 34 to 32 days?
It's a great headline.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 32 or 34.
I think I would have had a deal. This would have never happened. October 7th would have never happened. It could not have happened. I think I could have had a deal. Now it's much harder to have a deal, actually. And it's a deal that the hatred has only gotten worse. By allowing this to happen, and Biden allowed it to happen. Look, Biden is trying to play both sides, and he's failing, I think, unless people are stupid, he's failing, because what he did is took all the sanctions off Iran, and Iran's gained hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth. And you don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, and they're 30 days from getting one. They say 32 days away from having nuclear capability.
The only thing you're not allowed to say, is they're 33 days away. You cannot say they're 33 days. You can only say 32, 30, right? 31.
But when they say it's 33 days, you're in trouble.
It's over. That's the president talking. So I've never seen a cycle up of war propaganda happen so suddenly. In 3 to 4 minutes, we go from 0 to 150 mile an hour toward war. And of course, if you want to read about the whole plan, the Braverman Prophecy is out there on my Substack, georgewebb.substack.com, shameless plug, but it does go into how this, bolting this thing down will make a trans-Arabian pipeline necessary, and a Ben Gurion pipeline going into the East Med pipeline absolutely necessary. And we will build it for the Israelis.
Well, they are building it right now. They're using 2,000-pound bombs to clear the real estate.
And all the refugees, by the way, are going to where we said they would go, at the end of the pipeline bulkhead, which is Neom. The kids are streaming there, and this thing is happening as we speak. But I'm just saying they want us to now finance it, and it is going to happen. And I think the Mackinder map shows it perfectly. You can't be the person who's intermediating, who's the broker, unless you break the two things in half. If you don't break it into two things in half and make your strategic choke point the trade point, you don't get the money. You don't disintermediate. You don't intermediate, excuse me. And this is the answer to the test.
Yeah, it always is. And it makes, and again, the book that I've got featured on the front page of the Duke Report, which is the Reader's Digest version of this book, Conjuring Hitler, does such a good job in the foreword of that book, or the of explaining world politics in a way that just makes all of this stuff completely apparent. But again, getting back to the education system, it starts with that darn National Geographic map that we're all taught world geography with, because it doesn't give you the strategic outlook of the globalist ideas, and this map, really, this version of the same globe, really does.
I totally agree with that. Racing through, I mean, we've covered a lot of news already as far as what's going to happen. If you look at the years that's gone by, this has been the year of the momentary news story. Every month we've had kind of like a flash in the pan news story at the beginning of the month, and at the end of the month, poof, nothing.
Well, James Corbett talked about that on his year in review. He said that the 24/7 news cycle has been replaced by the 60/60 news cycle, I think, which is a 60-second story that has a 60-minute lifespan.
Well, if you look at the stories I look at, and I love James Corbett, don't get me wrong, but I mean, if you look at there's an Elon Musk type story, which is, okay, Elon Musk is bringing Twitter, the people who've been banned on Twitter back. So they'll hammer that with like 3 people, it's Tucker, it's Alex, and it's somebody else, and that's that theme for that month. Maybe not. Maybe you're right. It's only a couple of weeks, but it seems that's the real pattern this year, setting up, like you said, all the election stories for this year, reintroducing all the characters for this coming year, which is the big fundraising year, where people get involved and do the most social media and so forth.
Yeah, it's an ongoing, it's an onslaught of media, and again, I continually get video. I get emails every day with somebody sending me another video to watch, and it's almost always about something that is confirming some bias. That is, I would categorize them as "I told you so" videos, and I've really just been spending most of my time reading. And I try to poke my nose in a couple of times a day to see what's going on in the news cycle, but there's so much noise in the channel that you can find yourself completely distracted by things that at the end of the day have little or no significance. But the reason that they're there is to attract your attention. They become the bright, shiny objects, the things that steal your attention from you, so that you're not paying attention to things like, what are the mechanisms that they're using to crash the economic system? And, oh yeah, what do I do to prepare for that? David Webb, like I said, he does a very good job of taking you just straight through the legislative blocking and tackling of the way that the financial system has been changed, about how the derivatives markets have been created, about how responsibility for stock trades have been moved up to unaccountable organizations, that when they pull the plug on this whole thing, it's going to be 1930 or 1929 or 1930 all over again, where people who are in markets who think, well, one of the things that Webb explains in the movie is that it used to be, when Lehman Brothers collapsed, if you had stock in Lehman Brothers, that was still your stock. That wasn't the property of Lehman Brothers. You would take whatever your holdings were and you would move it over to JP Morgan or American Express or someplace like that. But they created all of these new institutions now that are intermediary organizations that can hold the stock. And so now if the big traders go belly up, their stock becomes part of the bankruptcy. So they're not actually, so what you thought was your property actually isn't your property. and that all of the 401ks and all of the investment vehicles that are being used and traded in the market right now are basically caught up in this. And that's going to wind up being the mechanism. I'm paying attention to that right now. It's not very sexy. It doesn't have explosions. It doesn't have great sound bites from a guy with blonde hair. But Webb lays out a very detailed process by which all of this stuff is going to happen. And if you want to be prepared for it, and if you want to try to figure out some way to take care of yourself, it might be a better idea to pay attention to that kind of stuff than this kind of knee-jerk stuff.
Yeah. As long as people have confidence in the currency, I figure they won't do anything with the currency. I know the digital currency offers a lot of track and trace, and then social control and social scoring and so forth. And that
well, George, you spend money when you go on the road, and I know that you're very frugal and you're very circumspect about the money that you spend. It's a lot more expensive now than it was a year ago.
Yeah, I look for places that are not popular, during certain times of the year when people want to be with their families, no, they don't want to be out in the middle of the Nevada desert, But yeah, I would agree with that. I don't feel that right now. The financial collapse, the 1929 type collapse, or even the mini ones like 2008 or 1987, I don't feel that right now. I don't know why. It could be just, it's anybody's guess. Tomorrow we could have the collapse.
Subway isn't 40 or 50% more expensive than it was a year ago.
Oh, inflation certainly is, in a certain extent, we're probably paying for the Ukraine war, in terms of inflation.
Well, I think that $2 trillion that got flooded into the market within a couple of weeks,
COVID,
and that started with Trump, by the way.
Yeah, well, and the always put a gun to the head of the president. The CIA never goes, hey, let's go in and present some options, to the president. They always like, hey, we have to go in and put a gun to the head and make it a no-win either way, and then we'll take credit for the win, and then we'll blame them for the loss. That's always the way they do it, right? So, is it true that Twitter only gives you 6 months of history? I'm scrolling back now, and I only go back to June 26th. So I was trying to do my year in review, but it looks like they only, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because there are certain. So Twitter about 2 months ago or so stopped serving previews of images on tweets. It used to be that if you posted a tweet with an image, it would automatically always show the attached image in the timeline. And for about I would say 80 or 90% of my tweets now, it's just a link. It's kind of like it used to be with TwitPic, which was the original Twitter. And Sundance did write a really good article about 6 or 8 months ago about the financial implications of Twitter's business. And he was just doing a finger in the air. He's not I don't think that he has the domain understanding or experience that even you have, George, as far as what servers cost and things like that. But he does know how much it costs to run his website, and how much, because he did get kicked off of WordPress.com, and we wound up putting him on his own servers. And so he does have to pay for his own bandwidth, and he does have to pay for his own things. And one of the things that I noticed, I think, when I saw that Twitter was doing that, is that if you imagine that images are taking up about 90% of your bandwidth, images and video are taking up 90 or 95% of the bandwidth costs that you have as a business, that if you stop serving images unless people click on them, that your hosting costs are going to get dramatically reduced by simply making a choice like that. Likewise, if you're truncating people's if you're truncating certain people's Twitter feeds at 6 months. I mean, I have to go back and see whether or not mine is, goes back 6 months. Maybe other people can go look and see if their feeds go back up farther than 6 months and let us know in the chat.
I think if you do a lookup, I mean, I see people's old tweets, going back, 5, 6 years, but I was just doing a scroll back. Maybe it's just the limitation of how much Elon will let me look back, when I scroll back. I just noticed it ended on June 26th.
Yeah, maybe it's something that you need a computer. Are you looking on a computer? You're looking on your computer.
Yeah.
Well, does that mean that we can't continue with the year in review?
Well, no, it doesn't. I think it almost is like we should look at it in terms of everything that was true in Trump Russia is now coming around the bend again with Trump Iran.
Okay.
And all the work we did and all the people we found that were subject matter experts, we need to revisit. I'll give you one right off the bat. Robin Gritz.
Yep.
She was the person who was at the FBI, who was the person in charge of the Blind Sheik and the investigation of the Blind Sheik after 9/11 in New Jersey. She was a New Jersey cop, like Task Force was a cop in California before she became a FBI agent. I think she got out of the academy like 97-ish timeframe. But here's a person who was doing the Levison kidnapping, the CIA agent who was kidnapped. I think it has something to do with Stuxnet and taking out, General, the general that took out the Stuxnet, Cartwright. They said, okay, well, until we get our centrifuges working again, you're going to stay with us. But she was also the person that went.
Here's a Swanson TV dinner.
Yeah,
and a deck of cards so you can play solitaire.
But she was the person going to the White House when there was different things happening around the world. She was the FBI person that went to the White House to present to Obama and so forth. It was a pretty big hitter. She reported directly to Andy McCabe, who became the FBI director. Right? She knew Mueller, who's doing the Mueller report, on a first name basis. She saw him as sort of a father figure. Those are, I mean, and of course, Jason is out there trying to trash her. I'm like, let's see, how many of those type of people did you get for the channel, and how many of those type of people did I get for the channel? I mean, it's like we're trying to talk to people who are in the room that know more about Iran than we'll probably ever know. And I do remember telling her one thing. She was saying the CIA guy, I can't remember, Bob is his name, I can't remember the last name, but the CIA guy was undermining her. She was trying to do this rescue mission, sort of like an Operation Eagle Claw, and put a lot of guys' lives at risk going in there. And I said, Levison's CIA. He was FBI before in Long Island with all those Ukrainian guys.
I remember you guys were going back and forth on that.
He's the broker. And she was saying it's conspiracy theory and so forth. Then she found out that Bob Mueller didn't tell her that Deripaska flew his jet in 2008 on a secret mission to Tehran. That they were flying weapons back and forth. And that's when she called me and said, oops, you were right. They were lying to me. They were making me the patsy. Those are the kind of people you want to cultivate as whistleblowers. If you think the CIA has a plan using FBI counterintelligence to take over the FBI, right? And this is the guy who's running the whole show.
Or the DTRA backdoor.
The DTRA is the virus vaccine game to put the muscle behind it. It's the low intensity weapon that's FBI counterintelligence is going to use. That's the key person to talk to, and so on and so forth. We developed a lot of these folks out, and rather than, we at least Jason published the picture of the BlackBerry, he published a picture of Deep BlackBerry, so we have a chance with Comer and the impeachment. I just think they're going to build this war thing up. I've seen this thing cycle up overnight. And the war is the thing that's going to take everybody's mind off the impeachment.
Right, and that's why taking a look at like what's going on with FDR and the lead up to World War II, I know there's a school of thought that FDR needed to let the Japanese attack us in order to get us into the war. I'm not totally convinced that FDR wanted us to be in the war. It seems like he was. It's almost like they trumped him, but they didn't have the technology to do it at the speed that they did it to Trump. So it took them 2 or 3 years what they could do to Trump in a year, or what they did to JFK in less than a second.
You don't need a whole lot of people in on the game to stage a sneak attack. Like the Hamas attack, Pearl Harbor. You just need the Office of Naval Intelligence, one guy to withhold the president.
Or you just need MI6 who's taking care of all of that intelligence for you in that part of the world and passing you that information to not pass that information on to you.
Well, we had lookout stations at Pearl Harbor, and then for operating surveillance in Guam and so forth. I mean, so I can't blame MI6 on this one, but
I'm pretty sure that Churchill knew Pearl Harbor was going to happen weeks before it happened.
That's probably fair. Yeah. I'm from the American point of view. I like what you're saying is put him in a double bind. Hey, Pearl Harbor's on fire right now. You can either get out in front of this and declare war, or you can be the pacifist president that's going to wait until everybody's in Little Rock, before you decide to take action. You have a choice here. And that's the way it always is with these things. You always have the war card to go to present the president a double bind. And this is what's happening right now with Iran, it appears. 30 days, I mean, Trump's saying 31 days, 30 days.
I like your president double bind frame. It's like, when does the president become the victim of the double bind? It's like what we were talking about in the last show when we were talking about Tucker and mice. All of how did he get moused, right? Was it money, ideology, compromise, ego? But at a certain point, somebody made the decision that it was a good idea to have Kevin Spacey on Christmas Eve, and that doesn't seem like an organic. It's like David Sachs going on to the gray zone. These don't seem like organic events. I mean, you have to, you and I do a podcast when we have a guest. We know that you got to go coordinate with the guest, and you got to find out what they want to talk about, and you got to be prepared when they come on, and you got to have questions and all those other things. And obviously, Tucker had a script, and obviously, Aaron Mate was
disinterested party.
Yeah. He was wallpaper in that interview. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a definite, a definite script there, which is saying we're going to be the leader. We have our perceived leaders. I can't even believe Sid Blumenthal's kid can be believed as a fighter of justice and freedom, but that's okay. But he's the guy.
He plays a really good evidence-based journalist.
His dad engineered Libya.
Right.
It's his dad engineered the white helmets in Syria. So it's hard to accept that. But anyway, these are people who are going to be our perceived heroes and so forth. And this is why citizen journalism, I think, is the winner again, because it punches through the paper mache. It punches through the frame that you talk about, that we get all of our news through, and all of a sudden people are meeting with each other and they're building a trust network and they're comparing notes and they're talking to each other face to face. And now we've gotten out of the box they're trying to put us in. They're trying to put us in the electronic box so they can just selectively feed us what we get. And citizen journalism, real citizen journalism, where you go and you have news gathering events and you do Peter Duke type seminars where you train and everything and learn best practices, that is a threat. I even see some of the channels talking about citizen journalism now and paying lip service to it.
Well, I mean, it's again, they need to create a bulwark. They need to create, if people aren't going to believe CNN anymore, if people aren't going to believe Fox anymore, they need to create a construct. That's what Breitbart is. Like Tucker is the new Andrew, right? It's like people. I called myself alt-right when I first heard the term, because to me, I felt like I was a conservative and I didn't like getting involved in foreign wars and blowing up brown people, and that's what made me alt-right. And somehow they turned that into anti-Semitism and racism. Like the term got grabbed and co-opted and twisted, but now Tucker's the alt-right, right? Now, but they always need to frame, and it is a frame. It's the Overton window. They need to put somebody on the far end of that, so that anybody who's past that is extreme or radical, right? And what makes us dangerous, what makes citizen journalism dangerous, and again, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is the idea that if you ignore the narrative and you only go with the metadata, then you can start to compare all of the coincidences that are implied by metadata, and you can construct counter narratives. Now, there may be 2 or 3, I'm making numbers up. There may be several different ways. 2 things can be true at the same time. So there may be several different ways that you can take the metadata and you can construct it into an alternate narrative. But the only way to fight people who are putting ideas like that out into the mass, into the media space, is to paint them with the conspiracy theory brush. Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Well, yeah, it's anything that involves more than one person is a conspiracy, right? So,
well, the Hillary Clinton emails, now that we're on the topic, they're either about flipping countries like pancakes, okay, with encrypted communications devices and encrypted communication servers, or they're about Trump Russia, right? Or they're, us just, trying to conduct business and run democracy, and then Trump hacking in with all of his Russian hackers to hack into the DNC, right? That Peter Strzok fashioned one of those scenarios, which is Trump Russia, and then the other one, which is all the metadata, using diplomatic immunity and so forth to run, weapons programs, bioagents, nukes, whatever, from the old Soviet Union, selling them all around the world, Kolomoisky making the money, back channeling it to the DNC. There's nobody outside of Barbara Streisand and her close family that believe Trump Russia, right? It's Donnie O'Sullivan's ever shrinking clutch, coffee clutch of people that believe that. Not even the CNN true blue people believe that anymore, right? It's so discredited. Maybe there's millions still, but nobody believes that anymore. So, like you're saying, they have to move the Overton window. Fox is the new liberal news outlet, and Tucker. The only thing I don't like, when you say when did Tucker get compromised, I think at birth, with Voice of America, maybe, with his dad being CEO of Voice of America, maybe that's when. But I think what you said about Andy Breitbart is exactly right. They're pushing him out to be Andy Breitbart again because they tried to put Alex in that spot, but Alex had the Sandy Hook thing. And he's damaged goods, and they just can't get beyond that Sandy Hook thing.
Well, yeah, and that's the metadata that when he came out and he did that Twitter space, and he came back on Twitter, it was Sandy Hook, Sandy Hook, Sandy Hook, Sandy Hook, Sandy Hook, and it's like, what about the other 100,000 stories that Alex has covered since he's been broadcasting? And then there's the David Knight angle. David Knight, I give a great deal of respect to David Knight, and there's the other guy who made films for. Well, there's a bunch of people. I think I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Aaron and Melissa Dykes, True Stream Media, they started out on InfoWars, and then they moved on and started their own thing. This other guy, what? Greg Reese. Yeah. Greg Reese was a filmmaker who worked for InfoWars who has recently moved out on his own. These people don't kiss and tell. So there isn't a big story to go along with their leaving, but these are very talented people who are evidence-based journalists. I have issue with some of Greg Reese's assumptions, but
in keeping with the Overton window,
yeah,
I think you're right. Is that Alex had that spot, and somebody's made the decision. They tried to see what his numbers would look like with the Elon Musk thing. They tried to do the battery cables and tried to do the recharge, and they did. It went and flatline. They put the paddles on. It was still flatline. You got a lot of people look at it, but then they said we got to go to somebody who's the new one, and it's going to be Tucker. Tucker's going to have that spot, like you said, with Andy Breitbart.
Right, but he's almost immediately lost a lot of people with the UFO thing, and that now he's got the Kevin Spacey thing. So, like every time he does something like that, his numbers don't get stronger, and I don't think it's the kind of thing that you can just ignore and not address and keep going with the hey kind of.
Yeah. You're getting good at
that. I don't even know how to do that, but.
Yeah, I tried my best at that too. I think, there is a juggling here and a positioning. They're putting the horses into the starting gate for 2024, and hopefully people are picking their horses, early on, and they're going to ride that horse through the election. And I think we look good. The Thinking Man's News, or whatever you want to call us, is going to look good for 2024, because we have the big network of the researchers. That's our ace in the hole. And every time one of these things happens, we go, oh, well, let's go through all the Iran experts we've talked to in the last 7 years.
Right.
And no one else has done any work. So they have to go. It's like the guy who doesn't does any math, or simple math or geometry or Craig or calculus. And all of a sudden he's getting third order calculus hit at him. The 3-planet problem. And he's like, I don't even. I'm back at the transitive thing. That's where news is. You have to have that depth, right, in order to really be able to read the metadata and be predictive. People do want the metadata because they know that's predictive. None of this other stuff, which is news of the month, news of the day, is predictive. It's not.
Right, and that's why things like, and I'll just bring it up one more time. That's why McKinder winds up becoming such a important thing, because one of the things that I learned from you very early on was you said that the people who are doing things are not that imaginative, that they use the same routines, they do the same type of operations over and over and over again. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine earlier, and I was talking about this thing as something as an operation, and he goes, "What do you mean by operation?" And he sent it to me right before the show started. I didn't have time to get into it, but these things are ongoing. And I don't know if I mentioned it in the last show, but I was thinking about technology, and because I've been writing about it. Clayton Christensen at Harvard Business School described technology as an idea or an invention for somebody being able to do something better than you could do it before. And so it doesn't really have anything to do with wires or electricity or heat or any of those things. It's an idea or an invention. The wheel is technology, right? If you were dragging a sled before, and you figured out how to make wheels, then it became much easier to move things around, right? So if you think of in reference to my book, Stealth Power and the Illusion of Democracy, if you've got this plan for taking over the world, but you're in a world that doesn't have any electronics, then you need to be able to come up with a mechanism for getting your program, which is to take over the world, right? To have one world government and take over the world, last for generations. Those programs need to be put in place with an understanding and a knowledge that the people who are going to complete the task are not the people who are going to start the task. And in order to do that, you have to build this kind of technology, which results in things like what you were talking about, which is that these things have patterns. They have meta patterns. And if you can get to a point where you can understand that the Hegelian dialectic isn't a theory, it's a plan, then you start to see it. You see this Hegelian dialectic going on all over the place. And it's got a weird name, and there's a little bit of a learning curve for people to understand what people mean when they say a Hegelian dialectic. But once you understand it and you've got a good abstract model in your head, you see it here, and then you see it there, and then you see it there, and it's everywhere. And the meta pattern is everywhere. And then the only response that people who are trying to protect their program have against being identified as perpetrators who are running a program is to do things like signal reduction or to call you a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, I think I'm just looking at Stealth Power right now and the Amazon Reader Board, and I see that you are now all-time 145th in nationalism, not the 30-day trending list.
Right, yeah.
You're 158th in fascism, and you're 356th in socialism. So what's really kind of cool is in less than 60 days, less than 30 days maybe, you're already climbing into the top 100 all time.
Yeah.
Right? In three quite disparate categories, I think: nationalism, fascism, and communism. So, I mean, maybe that's the big news of 2023. I think there's two really landmark things that happened in 2023. This idea of taking the juice of a book that has a lot of problems because of its temporal context and stripping away the temporal context for the juice, right? It's sort of like taking the spikes off of the whatever that fruit is, and the passion fruit, and getting the juice from the passion fruit. Who did it? Peter Duke, right? The other one is bringing people back from the dead and allowing them to have their own voice with their own words. And that was the Truman thing. Who did that? Peter Duke. So that, to me, those are the two big stories of 2023. Never before happened in history.
Well, thank you, George. I'm blushing.
I'm just saying, if you're really looking for the news of 2023, I think those things, and I'm not trying to be sycophantic or anything, those things are going to be the things that people start doing.
To your point, Jessica, when I got done with the book and she read it, her first remark to me is, she said, "Do you think this is a new category of book?" And I kind of do, because a lot of things that people like, I'm reading this book by David Livingstone right now called Terrorism and the Illuminati. Great book. But not unlike The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills, a great deal of the first half of this book is genealogies, which are like reading genealogies is like watching paint dry. It's brutal reading. And we read it out loud to each other so that we don't fall asleep reading it, because it's so brutal.
Tragedy and Hope is like that. About 700 pages.
Tragedy and Hope is like that, which is why Joe Plummer wrote Tragedy and Hope 101, and Gary Allen wrote None Dare Call It Conspiracy.
And George Webb wrote Less Tragedy, More Hope.
Yeah. Less Tragedy, More Hope. But I do think that there is a strategy of using AI to streamline the knowledge that is contained in these kind of dense and very academic volumes, and turning them into language that people who are of the current day are willing to consume. I mean, one of the things that my friend Klaus posting W's, the blurb on the back of the book, he says it's essentially a supervillain secret handbook for achieving global domination, and it's a fast, fun read. And he's making fun, but he says even a lowly robot polisher can enjoy it. And I think that this book is an enjoyable read. Like when I read it, I don't feel like I'm struggling to. When I'm reading David Livingstone, when I'm reading, we're also reading another book called The Witness Tree, and at least once or twice in each chapter, we have to stop and go look up a word. I'm not a dummy. Like my vocabulary is not on the level of William F. Buckley, but I try, and when I'm reading these books and there's words that are used that are really esoteric and academic and there's no good reason for it. It doesn't make the reading that much easier. It's like, oh, do you want me to pat you on the head, author of the book, and tell you what a smart boy you are because you use this word that's the appropriate word that describes exactly what's going on here, but it's a word that 99% of the people who are reading the book don't know, have to go look up, and it makes them feel stupid when they hit that word. There's none of that in my book. In my book, there's no words that you have to go look up.
On that note right there, that's my favorite pet peeve, which is if you have, I call it the perfect word problem. If you do find a perfect word, let's say it is a French phrase, and perfect is the enemy of good, do the perfect word. Go ahead and put your perfect word in there, but then put the good translation of the perfect word. So you're teaching the person the word just like you learned the word. And it's a community thing. It's a sharing thing rather than, hey, I'm so much smarter because I have a great, vocabulary. But this diffusing these controversial novels is the big idea. Prickly pear is the thing I was trying to think of. Is you take the spikes off the thing for the juice. There are a whole bunch of books that are banned now that are fantastic books because of just some woke thing. For instance, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, because it has the N word. People aren't reading,
and we have to say N word on this channel. Like
people aren't reading Adventures of Tom Sawyer because of the N word. I think if somebody rewrote
it's worse, George. It's worse because my wife loves Mark Twain. She has a bunch of Mark Twain books, and if you have a Kindle version of those books, they have new versions of them where they've taken all of the socially inappropriate words out, and the Kindle app is constantly asking her if she wants the new version, and she doesn't want the new version. So she's constantly telling Kindle, I don't want the new version.
How could you tell the story of injustice through an innocent person's young eyes, through his fearful experiences and him seeing the world for two different people, just because of the color of their skin? How else could you tell that story? Right. And it's the all-time classic, so but these are the things that I think maybe AI, and then there's a lot of colloquial expressions and there's a lot of, everybody's bashing AI right now. But I think there is opportunities. I think you've used AI in two creative ways that could open up a new genre, which is, recovered novels. Or whatever. You could say, take the stilted phraseology or take the genealogy out. I would love to see A Tragedy and Hope rewritten without the genealogy. That would reduce the book by half, and you don't lose any comprehension. As a matter of fact, your comprehension probably go up.
Yeah, well, I think that I think you're correct. There are certain technical issues that I ran into, though. Specifically, it's a good thing that the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion was a short book. It was really only a chapter in a book that had 24 sections in it, and that is that I needed to really go through and do it paragraph by paragraph in most cases. because I could not take an entire chapter and put it in to GPT and have it translate it for me, because it would overgeneralize, it would condense and collapse ideas. And so it isn't perfect in that way. But to your point, I keep telling people, if they're looking at AI right now as a knowledge base, it's a poor substitution to doing research. It's a really poor substitute. It doesn't have a knowledge of everything. So it's kind of like Consumer Reports. It gives you a surface level kind of, it has surface level knowledge on a lot of things. But one thing that it does have more information about than almost anything is language, because it's a language model. So it understands words, it understands the meaning of words, it understands the structure of sentences, it understands grammar, and it understands neurolinguistic programming. So if you understand language models, and you're simply trying to get it to communicate ideas in a different way, same idea, different way, it's amazing. It's really, really amazing at doing that. So
take the example of what you did for Truman, which occurred 1 month exactly. He timed it exactly on December 22nd after John F. Kennedy was shot.
Right.
And there's a message there. And he's saying, hey, I didn't know that this would happen. He's almost saying they did it. Right. But that has been buried to history. No one knew about that speech. That's right up there with military-industrial complex.
Right.
Right.
And I wanted to protect myself by making sure that when people watched it, that they understood that I did it with AI, thinking that somebody might steal it and then do something and do something else with it. But it is very strong, and I can share it right now if you want. Let me see.
And again, it's the ethics of the producer. It's the ethics of the creator. It's the same thing when you slap a fiction label on something or a nonfiction label as a writer.
Right. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, I put on December 22nd, 1963, following the JFK assassination, ex-President Harry Truman wrote a letter. This letter was not delivered as
I think it has become necessary to take another look at the purpose and operations of our Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. At least I would like to submit here the original reason why I thought it necessary to organize this agency during my administration, what I expected it to do, and how it was to operate as an arm of the president. I think it is fairly obvious that by and large, a president's performance in office is as effective as the information he has and the information he gets. That is to say that assuming the president himself possesses a knowledge of our history, a sensitive understanding of our institutions, and an insight into the needs and aspirations of the people, he needs to have available to him the most accurate and up-to-the-minute information on what is going on everywhere in the world, and particularly of the trends and developments in all the danger spots in the contest between East and West. This is an immense task and requires a special kind of an intelligence facility. Of course, every president has available to him all the information gathered by the many intelligence agencies already in existence. The Departments of State, Defense, Commerce, Interior, and others are constantly engaged in extensive information gathering and have done excellent work. But their collective information reached the president all too frequently in conflicting conclusions. At times, the intelligence reports tended to be slanted to conform to established positions of a given department. This becomes confusing, and what's worse, such intelligence is of little use to a president in reaching the right decisions. Therefore, I decided to set up a special organization charged with the collection of all intelligence reports from every available source, and to have those reports reach me as president without department treatment or interpretations. I wanted and needed the information in its natural, raw state, and in as comprehensive a volume as it was practical for me to make full use of it. But the most important thing about this move was to guard against the chance of intelligence being used to influence or to lead the president into unwise decisions. And I thought it was necessary that the president do his own thinking and evaluating. Since the responsibility for decision-making was his, then he had to be sure that no information is kept from him for whatever reason at the discretion of any one department or agency, or that unpleasant facts be kept from him. There are always those who would want to shield a president from bad news or misjudgments to spare him from being upset. For some time, I have been disturbed by the way CIA has been diverted from its original assignment. It has become an operational and at times a policy-making arm of the government. This has led to trouble and may have compounded our difficulties in several explosive areas. I never had any thought that when I set up the CIA, that it would be injected into peacetime cloak and dagger operations. Some of the complications and embarrassment I think we have experienced are in part attributable to the fact that this quiet intelligence arm of the president has been so removed from its intended role that it is being interpreted as a symbol of sinister and mysterious foreign intrigue and a subject for Cold War enemy propaganda. With all the nonsense put out by communist propaganda about Yankee imperialism, exploitive capitalism, warmongering, monopolists, in their name-calling assault on the West, the last thing we needed was for the CIA to be seized upon as something akin to a subverting influence in the affairs of other people. I well knew the first temporary director of the CIA, Admiral Sowers, and the later permanent directors of the CIA, General Hoyt Vandenberg and Allen Dulles. These were men of the highest character, patriotism, and integrity. And I assume this is true of all those who continue in charge. But there are now some searching questions that need to be answered. I, therefore, would like to see the CIA be restored to its original assignment as the intelligence arm of the president, and that whatever else it can properly perform in that special field, and that its operational duties be terminated or properly used elsewhere. We have grown up as a nation, respected for our free institutions and for our ability to maintain a free and open society. There is something about the way the CIA has been functioning that is casting a shadow over our historic position, and I feel that we need to correct it.
This is terrible. This is the worst of the...
Yeah, and this, you can control the president. You can make the president look very bad. You can say, okay, this our McDuff, Tom O'Loughlin, who is this kind of bigger than life heroic figure for Hoover and MacArthur and then Kennedy. They planned the Bay of Pigs operation. They go over it and over it for 30 days. Okay. Everything's a go. And then at the last minute, right, they changed the landing zone. Who ever heard of such a thing? I know that McDuff was no part of this, changing the landing zone after you've talked about something for 30 days. It was supposed to be on the other side, 70 miles away from the Bay of Pigs, at the foot of the Escambray Mountains, right? But at the last minute, they change it into and then not covered. You want to cover your landing. You want it to be secret, take over the beachhead. You don't want your people to die on the beach. You want to get to high ground and establish a beachhead, and then you start getting on the radio saying the rebels are attacking and start your psychological operations. They moved that into a tidal backwater, right? That was almost in the back door of Havana, where all the troops were for Castro and all the Russian armor that had been moved in. Now somebody queered that thing in the last day, and didn't tell Kennedy about it. And so Kennedy green-lighted it, not knowing that the Escambray Mountains and the cover was gone. And then when he found that out and said, what the hell's going on? I'm not putting more air cover into this. They're pissed at him because he didn't provide air cover. This is where intelligence can almost, this happened in April
Well,
3 months.
this is Fletcher Prouty talks about that in The Secret Team, and what he points out in that book is that the intelligence agencies did give Kennedy all the information about it, but they gave him 1 page of a 300-page book at a time. So he didn't ever have the full picture, which is why I like. Somebody said early on. Let me see, where is it? They said they were asking about the movie.
What movie are they asking about?
Here's the Webb movie. Yeah, here's the question. What is the David Webb movie? The David Webb movie is called The Great Taking, and it's at thegreattaking.com, and you can find it on the movie section of the Duke Report. It was the lead story yesterday, and there's a book that goes with it called The Great Taking, and there's a book you can find the movie by going to the book section of the Duke Report and going to The Great Taking, and the movie is right there at the bottom. But what David Webb did in his movie, which I like, is that Catherine Austin Fitts has written a series of articles about, and the people who support the Solorio report have written a series of articles talking about all of the blocking and tackling of how the Great Reset is going to happen. And it's for people who are in that world, in that high finance and government bureaucracy regulation world, it makes a lot of sense. What Webb has done in his movie is that he's made it kind of accessible, like we were talking about, and he synthesized it into a way with a filmmaker. He synthesized his story into a very kind of like logical timeline where you can see how they're doing what they're going to do. So synthesis, it's the drum I've been banging since the day I met you, George.
Well, and I hope by that one example that I cited, you can see how easy you could snatch the jaws of victory. You can snatch a victory from the president and make it a defeat.
Yeah.
And just by not telling him at the last minute that you've moved the actual landing zone, that's like D-Day, practicing, and then say, well, you know what? Instead of going to Normandy, we're going to go to Dover. I mean, to Calais. What? That's crazy. So of course Kennedy was going to fail with that, and I think what you see here is Truman in a quiet way, and Sidney Sowers went to Miami University. That's nowhere near any ocean, and he was a Navy guy, and he started this, and he respected. And I think there was a time when it was the SIS or whatever before it became the CIA after OSS, that it was originally a delivery mechanism of intelligence to the president. And my point is that you really don't need to have world financial collapse, right? All you need to do in an election year especially is just create one of these 70-mile moves, and now all of a sudden Biden, in this Houthi attack, let's say, or Operation Eagle Claw is a great example with Jimmy Carter.
Well, Biden's an interesting guy, and I think that we should probably aim at trying to wrap this stuff up.
Sure.
But Biden is very interesting because I was watching James Corbett's year-end kind of wrap up, and Biden is an old Irish gangster, and he's not a guy that you should underestimate. I mean, I don't think that you could pull off as much stuff as he's pulled off, the Hunter's laptop and all of the deals that have been made public and all of those things, and still operate with a level of impunity that he's been operating. If you don't have a book on everybody else, like he's got a book on Barack Obama, he's got a book on Lindsey Graham, he's got a book on Hillary Clinton, he's got a book on everybody. He's got all of these people have their own intelligence agencies that they don't. If you're depending on the DNC to do your intelligence work for you, you're never going to be president. You have to have your own book. You have to have your own organization behind you. And so I think that the reason that he's in power, still in power, and they haven't moved Kamala in order to like move Gavin in, whatever. There's a lot of people who are predicting that Gavin Newsom will be the next president of the United States. They just haven't figured out what the blocking and tackling of that is. Wouldn't surprise me. Again,
Wouldn't surprise me.
being unregistered to vote makes it much easier to kind of look at these things and go, without getting a stomach ache. But I do think that Joe Biden probably has a few cards under his sleeve, and that's the main reason that we still see that he's still operating.
Yeah, I wonder if he ever used encrypted communications.
Yeah.
Okay.
Indeed.
Yeah. So we'll leave it there.
Okay, let's see what the questions are, and then we'll get out of here. Zaganostra says Alex Jones was live on Jimmy Dore right now. Very interesting. What is the metadata saying? I don't know. I've been talking to you, Zaganostra, so we'll have to go look. But that should be fun. Alex on Jimmy.
Alex would be pouring the gasoline on the Iran fire. I think that's the moment that's the story of today.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's see.
We'll see.
That's Deborah Johnson says, I gave my paperback version to my son after a heated holiday debate. Heated? Interesting. James Corbett had a really, really funny Christmas sweater that I wanted to go buy, and it was sold out. But I go watch James Corbett's year-end review and look at his sweater. It's pretty good. She said, I offered it as 1903 Russian article transcribed with AI. Surprisingly, he opened it up and started to read. Okay, good. That's, again, that book is targeted at normies. And Zaganostra says, is journalism a modern artifact? We always had historians going back to Herodotus, but when did journalism emerge as an institution, leaving aside independents like George Webb? Ryan Holiday does a really good job in the first chapter of his book, Trust Me, I'm Lying, I think, of going through the whole history of journalism and the business models. I think the first chapter of that book covers that. But what the game changer in the history of journalism was a model for a long time. If you're talking about newspapers, that was driven by what's the word? Controversy. Extra, read all about it. It was their headlines. What's the word, George, for selling newspapers based on controversy? It's called
yellow journalism. Yeah.
Well, in any case,
well, I mean, that's how
newspapers were sold on the corner for a penny or whatever it is that they were sold for. My father sold newspapers during the Depression. He was a paper boy. And what the big change that happened in journalism that allowed journalism to create this patina of objectivism, of being objective, was the subscription model. It was the New York Times. The New York Times was the first newspaper that sold subscriptions. And when they did that, it gave them cash flow that they could, that wasn't dependent on the news. If you're trying, the internet has the same problem that journalism used to have, which is that if it bleeds, it leads, right? If we come up with a catchy headline and we create a video that creates a lot of fear or anxiety or humor, then we can count on getting more views than if we're just talking the way that George and I talk on most of these shows, which is just trying to be analytical about what's really going on. That's not sexy. It doesn't raise your blood pressure. It doesn't get your endorphins going, right? So the subscription business model is a business model that allowed newspapers to do things like investigative journalism, where they could put one reporter on a story that might take weeks or months or years in order to cultivate. But because they knew what their cash flow was, they knew that they could pay this guy's salary, and that eventually when he published this story, it would be a big competitive advantage over all the other newspapers, because you would have a story that other people wouldn't have.
And that's what buying a coffee does on a 1,000th level scale for us.
Right.
When you become a member versus buying a coffee, one time we have a little bit of breathing room.
Right. Or Substack.
But just as the sensationalism thing, isn't it interesting that the first victim?
That was the word I was looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that the first victim is American media, Robert Maxwell, Israeli super spy, his publication, that he bought from Times Mirror, they choose that for anthrax, the anthrax attack. They make it sure that there's somebody that dies inside the walls of the biggest tabloid producer in the world, right? And every American supermarket's going to have anthrax killer,
right?
And anthrax, and so we're not taking anything to chance with subscriptions that you're reading. The Sunday magazine from New York Times. We're going to boom put it on every counter as you're checking out of the grocery store.
Yeah, but the New York Times, they were innovative in doing things like the Sunday crossword puzzle, right? Because that became a competitive advantage. At that point, then everybody did crossword puzzles, but the New York Times crossword puzzle was like the William F. Buckley level crossword puzzle, right? Those things add value over time. And if you've got revenue coming in, I can tell you right now that on this channel, I make a little bit more than I spend, but it doesn't pay. It doesn't really pay the rent. It doesn't keep the lights on. It doesn't buy me a new Mac. I have to do other things. The book sales have been good. I'm happy about the book sales. And what I really like about the book sales is that I think that I've written an evergreen book. That is, I don't think that it's not going to go out of date soon. It's going to be whatever revenue it winds up generating over time will be consistent and forever, which I'm kind of happy about that. Okay, Teresa Be Kind said, I converted my 401k into metals and we sold our business and bought apartments. I wish I had done that. That's all I have to say. I wish I had done that. I do have some, I'll have to bring out my Bankster coin. So somebody said, I'm a newbie in this understanding. What hugely clicked last night, Cloward Piven strategy. Yeah, Cloward Piven. And, it's interesting. I hope somebody who's on Jimmy Dore soon talks to Jimmy Dore about Cloward Piven, because he keeps asking questions that are begging the answer. Oh, that's the Cloward Piven strategy. Don't you know that they were frequent guests of Bill Clinton's at the White House, and that they came up with a strategy on how to bankrupt the entire social welfare system in order to replace it with something even more draconian? Bankrupt the country, collapse the economy, overwhelm with immigrants. Yeah, the immigrant strategy is not just about overwhelming the social safety net. It's about putting military-aged people in a distributed way around the country, because the next civil war isn't going to take place on a border any place. It's going to take place everywhere at the same time.
And drones and something sprayed from drones, which I say is going to be an anthrax based platform.
And Scott Adams wrote a book about it too. Somebody said Bob Bear, George. I don't know what that is.
Bob Bear what?
Yeah, right. Bob Bear what? I don't know.
I remember Bob Bear. He was kind of a Republican strategist and commentator, but that's a little more context might help on that one.
Right. And Cindy, you keep asking me when's the new book ready. I'm not sure. I'm gonna go John Carmack on you, and I'll ship it when it's ready. I shipped a book this year. I did ship a book this year. So, and I know that you're asking for all the best reasons. I try to talk about what I'm writing about as much as possible on the show to try to kind of give it to you.
Have you noticed, Peter, ever since you got this book out, that I've never asked about the next book?
Yes.
You notice how I keep pimping the thing that's for sale now, today?
Yes.
Available?
I'll tell you this though, Cindy. Like, if you have specific questions about things that you think I'm writing about, I'm happy to answer them. I don't believe that in holding back. I try to talk about what the things that I'm writing about on the show all the time. So
yeah.
So if you got a question,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm done. Yeah.
Bob Bear is a CIA analyst, and he's talking about a potential rescue for the. I understand the Eagle Claw reference by Cindy now. Bob Baer is saying that we should try to rescue the hostages, and of course they'll move the hostages at the last second. Of course, a whole bunch of people from the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne will be killed. Of course, it'll be a Bay of Pigs. Of course, it'll mean that we'll have to go into a larger war. Yeah, maybe it's an Eagle Claw 2 or an Eagle Claw 3. Yeah, potentially.
Okay. 3 more. Here we go. Carmadoc says, on a plane to DTW, do you guys have a New Year's Eve show? I don't know. George, do we have a New Year's Eve show?
Why not? Thank you, Carmadoc. I need to send you a thank you card for all your stuff that you gave me, but thank you to everybody right now, and thank you for hosting such a great thing. And where is VQW?
DT.
Oh, DT. Oh, on the way to Detroit. Oh, okay. Well, let's do another charrette in Detroit for New Year's Eve, a New Year's Eve Christmas in Detroit.
All right.
Done. Yes. Aaron Adler does all of them this way. He says, right. I have an idea. Let's do a show. It's kind of like Mickey Rooney, and I'm there the next day.
Okay, so
anytime.
Grasshopper goes, what's the deal with the map you show? I don't understand. Okay, the map is, go onto the Duke Report and type in Mackinder in the search bar, Mackinder, and you will find links to Halford Mackinder's strategy on control of global politics. He ran the London School of Economics that was started by the Fabian Socialists and Natty Rothschild, and it is the synthesis of all of the globalist strategies for taking control of the planet, and it is based on Mackinder's Heartland and a guy named Space. I can't remember what the other political theorist was who came up with Rimland. There's Heartland and Rimland. And this is the way that the globalists look at the world. It's not the National Geographic map that you're taught in school. So if you go and you grab this book, which if you go to the front page of the Duke Report, it's a link on the left side, but it's called The Incubation of Nazism, a tale of the extreme measures undertaken by Britain to safeguard imperial primacy, 1900 to 1944. The first 2 chapters of this book do a very, very good job of explaining that. And I highly recommend this book because it is the most compact, getting back to the subject that George and I were talking about earlier, it is the most compact synthesis of global political strategy and theory that I've ever read. The first 2 chapters of this book. I haven't finished reading this book, but the first 2 chapters are worth buying it. So just go buy it. Let me see. Ayn Frank says, let me get rid of this. Ayn Frank says, this has taken over my life. And as a lone Patty in England, yes, please do a New Year's Eve show. Well, we don't mean to take over your life. I sincerely hope that you go get a book too from the Duke Report.
No, we want to take over your life.
Yeah.
I want to do an Ireland show, and I want to do an Irish general show for Bobby Kennedy, because Bobby Kennedy, Maxwell Taylor, who was in the Kennedy White House, who brought in because of the failure of the Bay of Pigs, was this Catholic general, and they named one of the brothers of Bobby Kennedy after his brother. Max is named after Maxwell Taylor. So I want to do a Irish generals show in Dublin. I can't promise you it'll be New Year's Eve night, but I promise you we will do a Catholic generals show for Macduff and all the Catholics that were a part of trying to save the country. I think sometimes we talk about the Pope and the Sovereign Order, Military Order of Malta, and all the intrigues that some of the Catholics, but there's been a lot of great Catholics in our history that have tried to save the country, and we do need to do a show for them.
Indeed. And if you haven't caught my interview with David Wemhoff, who wrote a 2-volume book called John Courtney Murray, Time, Life, and the American Proposition. That goes into a lot of the war on Catholicism also. George, last but not least, from George Held, Charles Held. What's George having for dinner?
Well, I'll tell you what my intellectual diet is.
Okay.
First of all, the world's best menu, sort of like the Hell's Kitchen guy. I can't remember his name, but the world's best menu. I don't like that guy, Wolfgang Puck. The Wolfgang Puck menu of intellectual dinner has been already prepared for you, and waiters are standing by, and it's called the Duke Report, and it really has an incredible choice of all these incredible intellectual meals, if you will, in these books. And a lot of these books cannot be found. A lot of these books are out of print, or they're so rare that they're $1,000 or whatever ridiculous price on Amazon. And Peter's gone to the trouble of recovering these books in PDF, and you can buy them or download them. A lot of them for free.
Yeah, a lot of them you can just download. Yeah, and if you're a member of the Duke Report, there are books. For example, Joseph Castaing's History and Destiny of the Jewish People, written in 1931, that you can find PDFs of it, but you can't find an EPUB of it. And so I took a PDF and I turned it into an EPUB. Mackinder, for the person who was asking me questions about the Mackinder maps, I've taken both of the Mackinder. One was a book, and the other was actually one was a paper that was presented to the Royal Geography Society, and the other was an article that he wrote for the Council on Foreign Relations, Foreign Policy magazine. I took both of those things and turned them into EPUBs. If you're a member of the Duke Report, you have access to all of those EPUBs that I created that I've been using for the research purposes of the other book that I'm writing right now called Reframing Reality. So those things are available to members. So if you go to buymeacoffee.com/the Duke Report and you become a member, you'll have access to those. Members have early access to the other book that I'm working on, Reframing Reality. And we do a Zoom call once a month, George and I. And yep,
I want to make the last point about this picture, Peter. I don't know if you can make it.
Cecil Rhodes. Well, I'll go find it and you can talk about it, because I probably have it here.
So what I think is so great about these books on the Duke Report is this picture was done by the London Times, right, or one of the Globe, and it's basically Rhodes straddling across the continent of Africa. He's got 1 foot in South Africa, and he's got 1 foot in Cairo, and you can't really see it, but there's a train line that he wanted to build in between those two things. And this is the best use now that we have AI tools. You can say, I would like to have a picture, there you go, of Cecil Rhodes straddling Africa to make a political cartoon, if you will, of what Rhodes' strategy is, his Anglo-American strategy for Africa. And really this rail line was it. And you could do this for these PDF books. This is why I would love to bring new life to these EPUBs, where maybe they couldn't afford an illustrator or whatever. And now you can drop these illustrations. And again, I think this is another thing, not only that a Peter Duke could do, but anybody.
Right. And to that end, we have a member who lives in Australia who approached me and said she wants to do what I'm doing. And by the way, it's a very good way to get very familiar with a book. Reading it is one thing, but taking a PDF of a book and then converting it into an EPUB is fairly meticulous. You have to kind of go through it word by word and sentence by sentence in order to make sure that you're doing a good job. And you experience that book in a way that most people don't experience that book, more like an editor would do it. And I would say that it's a very, good way to learn a book. But this is something that anybody can do. And so this member of the Duke Report approached me and she said, I want to learn how to do this. I spent 2 hours on a Zoom call with her. I went through all of the tools. I showed her all of the things that she needed to know and understand in order to move it from this kind of raggedy old PDF into something that's very easy to read in Kindle or the Apple book reader or any kind of e-reader that you've got. The nice thing about having them in that format too is that you can have your books read to you. I think Android does this, but the Apple phones will read a Kindle book to you. They will read an Apple iBooks book to you. It's robotic and it's not as great as having, Laurence Olivier read it to you, but if you're going for a walk, if you want to have a book read to you while you're at the gym, it's a really, really good way to do that. So I put the invitation out there to any member of the Duke Report. If you want to learn how to take these old PDFs and then turn them into something that is much more digestible to a general audience, especially in an electronic format, then I'm open and available to help anybody who wants to do that.
The Duke Report is really that club. It's sort of the creators club, and you change your whole life. Put your book out there. All of a sudden, you're meeting people from Australia, England, India, Ireland, like the gentleman from Ireland. It creates a network, and you enrich the world with your creativity. If you throw the graphics in there with the ChatGPT, you're going to take 10 tries, or you could take an existing picture and morph the two together. I did a lot of mine without any AI. I have almost no AI.
Right.
But you can learn these tools on the Duke Report if you become a member. So I encourage a lot of people just to become a member of the Duke Report and try your hand at putting out a book. We've coached a lot of people into putting out their first books, and people who said that this person never would write a book, right? And they've written 5.
Right, exactly. Summoner, last comment says, what happens when the PDF is just an image paper and not letters? It's called optical character recognition. It's one of the oldest digital analog technologies is out there. It's built into Adobe Acrobat. There are dozens of free and shareware applications that do it. And there's a great program that you can get for the iPhone. I think you can get it on Android. It's called VFlat. And VFlat will allow you to use your iPhone to create an EPUB from the iPhone. The one thing that I've noticed, so I'm reading the book Terrorism and the Illuminati by David Livingstone. The Kindle version of that book is simply the PDF that's been turned into a Kindle version. And while it's readable, it's got weird things like page numbers in the wrong place, and the footnotes are all wrong. And usually what happens when you want to convert a PDF into an EPUB is that you got to go in and you got to fix all the footnotes. That's the main thing, that in order to really make it readable. But VFlat Scan is the name of the app, and it is Larry, one of the co-founder of Wikipedia, Larry Sanger, tweeted about that app one day, and I downloaded it, and it's fantastic. It's a free app. It's really fantastic. And I think that they give you the first 8 pages OCR AI for free. And then the way that the app makes money is that if you want to have the entire book, the OCR part is free, but if you want to have OCR and AI on it, I think that they charge you for that. So anyway, Miriam says, B Lady says, a third into your book. Look forward to our interview. And I also dig the font you used. What is it? I'll have to go look. I think it's called, I don't know. I'll go look, but I'll tell you before we do our interview. I'm going to do an interview next month on Miriam's show about the book. So I'm giving people a chance to read the book before they interview me about it, because that's probably the way it should go. Anyway, with that, what are you reading there?
I want to just say I'm reading this book, The Ordeal of Otto Otepka, which is the key guy going to battle with Robert Kennedy and the key guy going to battle with John's dad, and how this is how the deep state was created after World War II. And They admit, I just read in the book, that they had all the records that the FBI didn't have. So they had all these files that this part of the research doing with John, and the FBI didn't have them. And Otepka could get all the FBI files. Proves beyond a shadow of doubt his deputy is the one who comes up with a Q-level clearance for the Department of Energy. This is the deep state. This is the story of the deep state. So a lot of these stories that we tell, Peter, aren't just this month, aren't just next month. Some of them go on for 4 or 5 years. But that's okay, because we're doing things that nobody else would do otherwise.
Well, I'm writing that I'm writing the name of that book down so that I can put it on the Duke Report, George. Because I don't think it is on the Ordeal of Otepka.
Otto Otepka.
Otto Otepka.
And he is the father of the deep state, a guy that nobody knows.
Well, I think John D. is the father of the deep state.
Well, Kissinger or Dulles. Yeah, Dulles. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, and we're probably a third of the way into the witness tree. So the books that we're reading, we read every morning, and we're reading The Witness Tree and The Illuminati and Terrorism by David Livingstone. Those are the books that we're reading in the morning, and then in the evening we're reading the Nazi book. I never remember the Incubation of Hitler Nazi book, which is fascinating. It's a really, really good book. All right, George, I guess I will see you then on New Year's Eve.
That's Sunday night?
I think that's Sunday night. Yeah. Sunday.
Okay. Well, a New Year's Eve show it is then. I don't know where it's going to be yet, but hopefully we'll Detroit sounds like fun on New Year's Eve, so maybe we'll go to Detroit. So there you go.
Yeah, don't they burn houses down in Detroit on New Year's Eve?
Detroit knows how to party, man. When they won the World Series in '84, they burned like 10 cop cars. It's like they're going to let you know they won. So, yeah.
All right, very good, George. We'll see you on Sunday, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.